Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Friday, September 13th. Friday the 13th, interestingly enough. A little later in this episode, Grace and I will discuss our defensive keys to the game for Baylor against Air Force on Saturday. But for right now, it's time for our weekly visit with the Baylor football assistant coach. Earlier this week, we were joined by Baylor defensive line coach Inoke Breckterfield to discuss the progress of his defensive group this season. Here's that interview, and we'll come back with a little bit more detail on what Coach had to say. We're joined by Baylor defensive line coach Inoke Breckterfield. Coach, thanks for joining us and taking the time with us today.
Oh, no problem, man. I appreciate it.
So through two games, defensive line has been solid, but how would you rate your performance of your group and what they've done on the field through the first two games of the season?
You know, I think they've had some production. I think there's a lot of areas we still can grow. You know, I think so some attention to detail stuff, like I talked about when I first got here. That's got to show up. You know, right now I think the ones are pretty solid. I think the twos need to kind of close the gap. But you know, we can be so much more better, in my opinion.
So, Coach, the defensive line had some struggles last year, and I'm sure you went back and watched some of the film or kind of what was going on there. Was there a particular focus that you had that you kind of knew you needed to kind of establish when you got to Baylor for your group?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really attention to details, physicality, and just being right. You know, I think there's. You know, I think if you just do your job and concentrate on doing your job, man, the plays will find you. You play really good defense, and I think it has been our focus. And when we're doing our job, we can be pretty good, you know. And when you watch the film, if we're not doing our job, you're giving up big hitters. You know, in my opinion, we gave Utah some hidden yardage there that really shouldn't have been there. And I think that was us beating ourselves at times.
Can you talk a little bit about Trevin Mai and kind of his progress from last year? Obviously, you weren't on the staff last year, but really through the offseason, his development, strength and conditioning. And now it seems like he's turning into a player who's making plays and making big plays and not just being consistent, but he's able to flash and show some big things for the defensive line.
You know, when I first got here, he came to my office and we talked about ways he can get better. And I thought as I watched him last year on film and kind of was going through spring ball with him, I think there was a lot of thinking. You know, I always told him when you're thinking, you're stinking. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of thinking as opposed to just going and playing green and playing free. You know, he knows the playbook. Now it's about him just going and cutting it loose. And I think he's done a good job there cutting it loose. That's one thing that I harped on with him in the spring was just, hey, man, just go. You know, just go play free. You know what your job is. Now go execute your job at a high level and do it fast, man. So he's been working at that. We talked about foot speed with him, and he got on the jump rope all summer. And really wanted to get his fast twitch muscles, and that was something he worked on steadily in the offseason, and it's showing up on film. So I'm happy for him. And again, we got a lot of ways to go, but I like the start he's had.
You know, Coach, the Utah team had a long drive towards the end of the game. It was like a 7-minute and 30-second drive. Is that something that you're definitely going to be focused on, is just kind of finishing games? I know the defense was on the field a lot, but just making sure that, you know, the whole game, that they're finishing strong.
Yeah, you look at that drive, it was a couple of third downs that we gave up, you know. And, you know, on that long hitter, on that one long hit, it was – you know, I think we could have did a better job how we played that play. If we would have played it the right way, it wouldn't have broke for that long one, you know. And I think, like I said, man, and credit to Utah, man, they're a good team. But at the end of the day, man, you go watch the film and you know you hand them some freebies out there. You know, they rush for 170 yards. You look at 80 of those yards should have been there if we just execute the job. So it's really, to me, it's just, we got to get off the field, but at the same time, we got to do our job and be right. And everybody's got to be on the same page, and everybody's got to be great in the details of each call. And then you do that, you have a chance to be a really good defense.
What type of challenges does a team like Air Force present? And obviously it's the triple option. It's not seen a lot, but when you watch them play, and what is the main focus for your group this weekend against Air Force?
Being assignment sound. You have a job. It's a do your job type of team. They threaten you with the option. They threaten you with all the different things they do. The option is one thing, but that's not really who they are. I mean, they have it. They have the option to make the game plan that, but they have a bunch of other stuff they do. So, just being able to understand what we're trying to get done, and then everyone's going to go in, in our defenses, and you got your one job you got to do. Make sure you execute that job, because, as you know, in this type of offense, you're one crease away from a big hit, and so it's being gap sound. It's being great in the technique that we're implementing this week versus an offense like Air Force, and we do that. It'll be a good day.
With someone kind of like Air Force being the next opponent, and you've mentioned technique and being right a lot so far, is that something this week that changes based on your opponent? Like, are there things that you're definitely going to work on specific for kind of each opponent going forward? As there's a lot of different, offenses you're going to face this year.
Yeah, I think the way they run block, right, is you got veer releases, you got fullback dives, you got cut blocks, you've got misdirection stuff. You got all kind of different things you got to work on, and eye discipline is going to be big. Gap integrity is going to be big. Staying on your feet is going to be big. So there's, I rep cut blocks, but I haven't really repped cut blocks. You know what I mean? But this week is, we're repping the hell out of cut blocks starting today. So it's the different blocking schemes you're going to get. You want to make sure that you kind of hit them early in the week and fine tune it as the week goes on, but there's different things that you got to work, especially in the trenches, against an offense like this, that you ought to make sure everybody's comfortable with, because it's football, but it's different. You know what I mean? There's a certain different blocks you get that you got to make sure you're right with, and so just making sure everybody's good in that.
How do you coach a player like Jackie Marshall, who has that natural explosive and athletic ability at his size to be attention to detail, but then also balance that with his ability to make explosive plays for you inside? You don't see it as much inside with a guy his size.
With Jackie, I just said, hey, man, you play fast, I'll fix it. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to know you're at your best when you're going. You know what I mean? I don't want you to be playing slow. I said, if you're wrong, I'll fix it. But I don't want you to be afraid to make mistakes. I'll reel you in when I need to. But at the end of the day, I said, you are at your best if you can fly around and play free and play green. And I'm expecting to do that every game. And so that's my conversation with Jackie. Not everybody has a conversation. But Jackie's the guy that I'm having those conversations with, where you have an ability, an explosiveness to you. And so I can give him a little bit of slack, but when I got to reel him in, I'll reel him in. But we are at our best, and he's at his best when he's playing fast and free.
Coach, in your first season at Washington in 2022, y'all drastically improved. You went from outside the top 100 in run defense and sacks to being a top 25 unit in both. What are some of the similarities maybe you see from that group to this group?
Very similar. You know what I mean? I think, like I said, I said, and it sounds like a broken record, but I think the attention to detail and knowing what you got to do, right? I tell my guys all the time, and if you do your job, and the plays will find you. You know what I mean? And so I'm big on that. And I'm big on guys just going and playing hard and playing fast and playing free, being fundamentally and technically sound in what we're doing. But I wanted to understand the balance of, when can I go? When can I steal it? When I got to really play technique? And there'll be opportunities to steal plays along the way by formation, by alignments, by stances. It's about them seeing it and being able to take it and take chances, and knowing that their coach got their back and those type of things, and so I'll let guys go, but at the same time, I'll make sure I reel them in when it needs to be reeled in.
You have a little bit of history with Coach Randa from Wisconsin. how do you see him falling back into that role as a play caller and as the linebackers coach and through 2 games? He's had a little bit of time off, but now he's back in it. What do you see from him and that energy that he's bringing to this unit?
I like it. I like it. He brings an intensity. He brings no frills, take care of business. The expectation is high, and it's everyone's got to try to get there. You know what I mean? He tells you exactly what needs to be done, and our job as coaches and as players is to meet his expectations. So, I think he's after 2 games, he's kind of settling in at it, kind of kicking off the rust. But I think he's enjoying it. I know he's enjoying it, kind of being back in that role. But I think there was some rust to kind of dust off a little bit, and I think he's enjoying what he's doing, obviously.
I know you mentioned kind of wanting the twos to take another step forward. When you kind of look at the depth in your room, is there, a guy or two that you're really thinking might take a jump forward? Is there, guys that you really want to see kind of flash a little bit more so that they can take some of the load off the ones?
Yeah, I think Ronnie, in the limited snaps that he's had, he's getting there. When he kind of came in, he was a little raw, but I'm on him every day about physicality and toughness. Ty needs to be more attention to his details and things. He can be a really good player once he kind of locks into and understands and knows the importance of being right in everything we do. He can be a really good player. Big E is big. Big E comes in, a big body guy. My expectation for him coming in was to really eat combos and own that middle. He's got to take the next step at that. So my expectations for those 3 guys, that's kind of my twos right now. When Tez gets back, Tez is going to be jumping that mix. So excited for that. But I think it's more about, Ronnie catching up and playing physical, Ty being more attention to details because he can be a really good player, but it's he's got to be right to be good.
Coach, we really appreciate your time today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in McLean on Saturday.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
So I think it's pretty obvious that the defensive front has been a strength for this defense, kind of for the entire team through 2 games. Overall, it needs to stay healthy. I know Cooper Lands is banged up right now, kind of to be determined if he plays this week or they hold him out. Devontae Tesno needs to get back into the lineup. He was a guy that was out during fall camp. It's going to take him a little bit of time. I'm curious if he's even practicing right now. We don't have a ton of transparency with injuries. There might be a chance he is practicing right now. But overall, man, what are your thoughts before we move into the defensive keys on this group and what Coach Breckterfield has kind of done in one offseason with this group?
It's definitely been a huge step forward. And I think you've seen a lot of development from, a few different guys up front that I think are taking advantage of their opportunities, whether it's Trevin Mai or, Jackie Marshall taking a big step forward. And then you bring in a Linus Noel and you're feeling good about that. Cooper Lands has a lot of experience and he seemed to, be developing well also. And so I think that's nice. The thing that Inoke definitely mentioned was that, the depth needs to take another step up, that they need more consistency from the twos. And so I think that's going to be the next step for this group. He mentioned Trey Wilson as a guy continuing to improve. Ronnie Maggio actually got some snaps this past weekend, so he seems like one who could be nearing more of a role. And then, of course, Devontae Tezino, when they get him back, I think that's going to be an exciting development, too, to have another, 6'5", 300-pound, 305-pound type guy. You can't find too many of those who have as much experience as Tezino does. And so it gives them just another option to utilize. So that's really the key for me, is just seeing them continue to grow and really hoping to see the depth emerge, because I feel pretty good about their, starting 4 guys, starting 3 guys, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And this is one of those areas where you can't teach experience and maturity. And it's a lot of similar faces. Obviously, Jackie Marshall being a guy who came back from injury, but a lot of familiar faces that we were used to last year. And now they're back and they're playing better. They're just a little bit older, a little bit more experienced. And it helps when you have a guy like Linus Noel who can play nose tackle as a backup and potentially as a starter this week if Cooper Lands is out. But he's a big body. He can hold up against the run. And they just didn't have that in the backup positions last year. So you hope that depth continues to develop. And truthfully, like, is going to be a good matchup for that group this weekend against Air Force, and they're going to have to play discipline, which leads me into the defensive keys. And that's my number one, is stay disciplined against Air Force. Running the option is part of what they do, and they will put you in binds if you don't do your job. So this group has been good. They've been able to create disruption. They don't have a ton of tackles for loss right now, but this is an opportunity for them to move into that category and get a few, because Air Force is going to run the ball a lot. And not that they haven't seen a lot of runs the first two weeks, but I think Baylor has the opportunity here to open things up, but they have to stay disciplined first and foremost.
Discipline's going to be huge in this one because it'll allow you to avoid giving up huge runs. It'll allow you to avoid getting caught on play action type things like that. And just staying disciplined in general is kind of what you need in these type of matchups against a triple option team. I think I wanted to do a little something just talking about Air Force just in general offensively. Mm-hmm. This is a matchup that Baylor should feel really good about. Like, there's nothing about this Air Force offense that is really scary. They beat Merrimack 21-6. As I mentioned on the episode we did the other day about the offense, Air Force, they scored 21 points, but they were basically gifted 14 of those on 2 Merrimack turnovers. So they scored 21 points. Merrimack turns around and gives up 63 to UConn the next week. So I'm pretty sure Merrimack is pretty bad. And then also UConn lost 50-7 to Maryland in week 1. So if you want to do a little transitive property there, it tells you that win is not impressive at all. And then the San Jose State game, Air Force scores 7 points in that game. The first week of the year, San Jose State gave up 24 points to Sacramento State. So again, not an impressive showing at all. Air Force averages 3.1 yards per carry. I went back and did all kinds of research, Colt, because I just kind of wanted to see, this feels weird for them to be at 3.1 yards per carry. I went back 25 years, and there's not a single season in which they averaged under 4.2 yards per carry. And only 3 times during that span have they averaged less than 5 yards per carry. That just tells you where they are at right now. Baylor needs to take advantage of that. There's no way Air Force should run for more than 3 yards per carry. I think Baylor's goal should be under that. But I do think this is a great matchup for them if they stay disciplined to actually be able to go out there and really dominate. I don't know if they're going to give up, a shutout. But I do think they should be able to go out there and really make life hard for Air Force. And really, Air Force does sort of well running the ball is kind of the strength of this Baylor defense up to this point.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to try to run the football, and what's coming. They're not going to pass a ton. They will take their shots. But if Baylor's defense is what we think it can be in this season, if it's not there yet, what it could potentially be, they're going to have to play and show it this weekend, because if not, then it immediately creates more questions for the rest of the season. And not that there's these one-off games where Oklahoma and Army are playing a couple of years ago, and Army's just moving the ball. Well, Oklahoma still ended up being a pretty good team that season, but it was just but this Air Force team is not set up like that particular team, or even Air Force when Baylor lost to Air Force in 2022 in the Armed Forces Bowl. It's just different. And so if Baylor's defense can't go out there and take control of this game, regardless of what the offense does, regardless if the offense puts them in bad positions, this defense needs to go out and control this game and help get the win. They should be able to truthfully win this game on their own. And if they don't, that's a sign of concern for me. And I mean, there's some variance there. I understand things can happen. Anything can happen in a game that creates 50-yard play and is a bust, and it's a one-off situation. But overall, this team needs to play well. Defense needs to play well.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, if you're just saying, hey, you just need to be as disciplined as Merrimack or San Jose State, that's not really asking for that much. I mean, for the defensive line, just another stat, Air Force ran for 166 yards, 3.0 yards per carry against Merrimack. Merrimack gave up 278 yards rushing and 7 yards per carry to UConn. That is it's shocking that Air Force didn't run the ball better against Merrimack, and then they turn around to a UConn team that, maybe that's a bowl team. I don't really know. I don't think they're great, though. And so for them to have that kind of success is pretty shocking. The other area I want to kind of look at, I have 2 more, but third down third down for Baylor in this game, I think, is one of the biggest keys. They got to get off the field. Currently, Air Force is at 30% conversion rate on third down, and then they're 4 for 8 on fourth down. But if you dive deeper into that, they were a lot better against Merrimack. They were 7 of 17 on third down, 2 of 3 on fourth down versus Merrimack. Then they turned around against San Jose State at Air Force, and they were 3 of 16 on third down, 2 of 5 on fourth down. Baylor's defense is much closer to San Jose State's. They should really be able to take advantage of that and keep Air Force around that 20 to 25% range. That's my expectation.
Yeah, and on the opposing hand, Baylor's defense on the season is number 1 in the Big 12 right now in third down percentage. And obviously that's all relative because of the schedules being variant from team to team. But Baylor has done a good job on third downs. Even with the Utah game, they have done a pretty good job. So that kind of ties into one of my points, and that's 3 and outs. Air Force wants to control the line of scrimmage, shorten the game. The best way to keep that from happening is force 3 and outs, get the ball back to your offense, let your offense get more reps. So it starts with that. In Air Force, I don't know the exact numbers. I did the math and I didn't write them down, but like they've been forced to 3 and outs or less 5 or 6 times each game. And that's not what they like. That's the last thing they want to do. You want Baylor to, if they're having 10 possession games, I think you need to force 3 and outs 50% of the time. Sometimes later in the game, if you're up big, that can change. You play a different defense, you bring in your backups, but early on, 3 and outs should be a relative possibility. And if they can force 3 and outs, to me, this isn't a measuring stick against Air Force. This is a measuring stick against Baylor and what they're able to be in the future for the season. If you're not forcing 3 and outs against Air Force, who's somewhat one-dimensional and not very good at the one-dimensional aspect, it's going to be an issue. So if they can force 3 and outs in this game at a high rate early on, that's an encouraging sign for me.
I agree. I agree with that 100%. I think that is an area that I noticed as well when I was kind of going through and looking. Even against Merrimack, they were getting pushed around and having 3 and outs, and that's really pretty shocking for an Air Force team that wants to control time possession. Their time possessions have actually been kind of split right down the middle. It's like 30-30, which that is not a typical Air Force game plan at all. My last kind of area that I'm looking at is turnovers. Baylor needs to force a couple turnovers in this game. I'd probably say at least 1, but I would say closer to 2. Air Force has given the opponent some chances. They have 3 fumbles this year, and they happen to recover all 3 of them. And then they have 2 interceptions. So there's been 5 opportunities in 2 games for the opposing team to take advantage of a mistake that Air Force makes. This is Baylor's chance to do that. And it's something we heard all offseason. Aranda mentioned it when we talked to Jamar Chaney week 1. He mentioned it. Turnovers. They want to get back to forcing turnovers, become better at that. We didn't see it against Utah in a game that they really needed to force a turnover, a game that it felt like you needed to force a turnover in order to be in the game, or at least, make a chance at a comeback. They couldn't get it done. And so now going into this game, can you force those turnovers? Because I do think that's going to be extremely important in Big 12 play. We know how thin the margins are. If you can win the turnover battle, it's going to give you even more opportunities to win games in conference play.
Yeah, and generating turnovers in this particular defense starts with the front. I think that you want to get into 3rd and long and have them throw interceptions, and obviously you want to be physical and create fumbles, and you don't want to rely on another team's mistakes, right? Like you want to do it on your own. And so I think for Baylor, leading into my final point, is generate tackles for loss, and obviously within that is sacks. You're not going to have a ton of opportunities for sacks, but if you're generating tackles for loss early in drives, and you're making them throw it on 3rd and 13, that's not what they're set up to do. It can lead to sacks. It can also lead to turnovers. And I haven't looked at the numbers like you did in terms of interceptions, but I'm assuming I think they had 1 that might have been like the first or second play of the drive interception, which is interesting. But this team's not going to be built to throw it on 3rd down and long. And so you have to get them there, and it starts with generating for tackles for loss. Now, the tough part is that Air Force is built to not give up tackles for loss and negative plays because of the option. They only have 6 in 2 games. Baylor's not doing it at a high rate right now either. And I think that a little of that has to do with the game plans of their opponents and what Baylor is willing to do in, say, a game against Tarleton. I think this front 7 is that number is a little bit of an outlier for this front 7 and the way that they're going to play throughout the rest of the season. Utah was, in my mind, going to just do everything they could, especially when Cam Rising went out, to not have negative plays. They did generate a few of them, but we're going to see it more. I just have a feeling we're going to see more of these tackles for loss, and it needs to start this weekend. Like, you have to have your big guys up front create havoc against a triple option, let your linebackers clean it up. And obviously those guys are going to get the front line, the defensive liners are going to get some, but you want to open it up for Keaton Thomas, Matt Thomas, Kendrick Simpkins, Carl Williams, all those guys, Garmin, those guys are the ones that need to be racking up the tackles for loss. So I'm anxious to see if they can do that. And again, it's about the bar that Baylor has for the rest of the season. If they don't do it now, when are they going to do it?
Right. And I know that we could look back at the end of this game and be like, oh, it was just a tough matchup and Air Force was able to run the ball a little bit. And maybe this offense is just something that was different for Baylor to have to game plan for. But I don't see that being an excuse that comes to my mind just based on the way Air Force has played this year. I would also say that, you mentioned, if you get him in 3rd and long, the quarterback, he's turned it over some and the run game, if you make them not be able to run the ball, their quarterback's also only completing like 35% of his passes. So there's literally like a 1 in 3 chance that he's completing a pass regardless of what the defense looks like. And so that's really important as well. The secondary should get some opportunities here to bounce back. I'm specifically looking at the cornerbacks to bounce back after what happened to them in Utah. They gave up some explosive plays. They gave up some pass interference things that they were not at the level that they're going to need to be at for the rest of the season. And so I think this game's important just to build some confidence, because this shouldn't be a game that Air Force throws for more than 50, 60 yards. Like, really, they're averaging like 63 a game. So they really shouldn't throw for much more than that. So it's a great opportunity to build some confidence, not give up explosive plays, and potentially come up with some turnovers as well in the secondary if given the opportunity. But I think they do need to be opportunistic. They do need to get in the backfield, create havoc, create turnovers. Really take advantage of an opponent that I don't think is going to really scare them that much, or at least they shouldn't.
Yeah. And this is a game that David Random mentioned it early in fall camp that they're going to start prepping for it, spending some practice time on it. It sounds like might have even gone back to the spring a little bit and what they were going to do. So after that 2022 loss in the Armed Forces Bowl, there's no way that this team was ever going to be overlooked, that Air Force is ever going to be overlooked by Baylor. And that's obviously a completely different team than took the field for Air Force that season. But there's a lot of guys on this Baylor team that remember that game, and that the players were asked about it. Devin Lemire was asked about it. And he's like, we just have to prove that the standard is we're going to be more physical, and we are the more physical team. And so their mindset's right. And they've been, for the last 2 years, that's kind of been the start of everything that we've seen over the last years. That Air Force team took advantage of that particular team in a bowl game, lack of focus or not, and it kind of just spiraled down from there. So backing up and going to this particular game, not that it's going to be a complete 180, but you want it to be a 180 from what we saw a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. And you would expect Baylor to have a chip on its shoulder as well going into this game, because they were thoroughly dominated in that game. They were punished, out physical. They were, there's no other way to put it. One team wanted to be there, the other team didn't. And so now going into this game, can you flip that around when the team that you're playing seems to be at the disadvantage? Can you take advantage of that? It hasn't really been proven over the last year or so that you can. And so now is an opportunity to really come out and do it. And so we'll see if they're able to. They got to get over the hump on a few of these things. And I think they really got to show, that this defense is for real and that this defense is legit going into Big 12 play. For them to do that, I think this is a perfect game for them to be absolutely dominant, coming off of a game that was, disappointing against Utah for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. So we got a little bit more time here. We're going to do our game picks, predictions for the scores. And kind of a tough one for me to really hammer down, because there's so many variances of how the game plays out, what the offense decides to do late in the game. Like, can you pick up some garbage time scores with your backup? But right now, and I'll start off with mine, I'm picking 38-3. I think that this team is going to give up something at some point in the game. I think it'll be a mindset of not allowing Air Force in the end zone, and I think Baylor has the capability of doing that. Offensively, just be consistent, maybe pick up a special teams or defensive touchdown somewhere in the mix, I'm not ready to say that the team's going to score over 45 against Air Force, a defense that's better than Tarleton, obviously not as good as Utah. But if they do, then great. That if your defense can put you in positions to score more than that, I think that's where it's going to start. If they surprise me, even better. If the offense can come out and be consistent in running this offense, really for the first time this year, I'm going to be very excited of where this potential season can go. Because I don't think Air Force is a terrible defense. I think that they present their own challenges, and they're going to be disciplined. So Baylor has to go out and execute offensively. But my pick at 38-3 is based on the defense getting stops, generating and setting up the offense in pretty good positions.
That's the exact mindset that I have as well. Regardless of how great Baylor's offense plays, I think they're going to be set up really well by the defense, and they're going to be put in positions to succeed and score points in this game. I think eventually they will hit on some plays as well and actually show, continue to show explosiveness, but also be a little more consistent in that regard as well. But I just think defensively, Baylor is at a huge advantage here. This should not be a matchup that they give up very many points, give up very many big possessions, really give up much at all. So if I go in with that mindset, they're going to create a lot of 3 and outs, maybe create a turnover or two, and get off the field rather quickly on third down. Then that means that I feel like they're going to win this game rather easily. So I think my score prediction, I think I sent it yesterday, and I was something like 31-9. I think after doing a little more research, I think it's going to be more like 33-6, something like that. I just don't really trust Air Force scoring that many times. So maybe 2 field goals. That's about all I'm willing to give them. But I think Baylor's going to win this game rather easily. And honestly, it's not going to tell me too much outside of just Baylor taking care of business, because I do believe that Air Force is not a bowl team this year and just not a very good team this season.
Yeah. It is just do what you're supposed to do. Go out and win your matchups, play with a chip on your shoulder. And truthfully, Baylor needs that in this game. If you don't have it in this game after Air Force beat you 2 years ago, you're probably never going to have it. But we've seen defensively, specifically, this team has played with the chip on its shoulder. It's been physical, and that's where it's going to start in this game. If the offense generates more than what we've seen, great. It's going to be welcomed for sure. So, Grace, appreciate your time today. All right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thanks to Coach Breckterfield for the visit, and each of you for listening. For Grayson Greenhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great game weekend, and sick 'em Bears.